I am California of the past.
I am California of the past. I am California of the past.
Hello, I'm Lian Gouw, the author of Only a Girl, a historical novel set in Indonesia between 1930 and 1952. The Hayward, California Library invited me to tell my life story. The oddity of being unable to speak Chinese, the language of my ethnic origin, despite mastering 4 languages and claiming Dutch as my mother tongue, did not strike me until I was a middle-aged adult. By that time, I had immigrated to America from Indonesia, the country of my birth. Indonesia, a chain of more than 17,000 islands straddling the equator between Asia and Australia, was referred to the Gordel van Smaragd, Belt of Emeralds, by the Dutch colonialists. In the Netherlands East Indies, the Dutch were a superpower. For 300 years, they ruled over the other ethnic groups as parents, favoring the child who proved to be of the most use. In this case, the Chinese, being more industrious than the laid-back native, became the Dutch favorite. The anti-Chinese riots and manifestos after Indonesia's independence are the backlash of this favoritism. Childhood memories take me to Bandung, a city on the slopes of the Tangkuban Perahu, one of the many volcanoes on the island of Java. I grew up there, and it is from that environment I mined the material for my novel, Only a Girl. An upper-middle-class Chinese milieu protected me for many years from the harsh reality of colonialism. However, it was unable to prevent the Indonesian Revolution from affecting my life. Until President Sukarno, Indonesia's first president, declared independence from the Dutch crown on August 17, 1945, I took the Dutch life for granted. Oblivious to the illiteracy around me, I attended all Dutch schools, only to find myself dumbfounded when under the new Indonesian regime, the Dutch were ousted from Indonesia, and Dutch was banned from schools. When this happened during the Japanese occupation of Indonesia during World War II, the change did not affect me. Instead of sending me to one of the Chinese or Indonesian schools, most Chinese and Indonesian children attended to them, my family sent me to an underground Dutch school. Thus, I was able to enroll at the proper grade level at the HBS, an all-Dutch high school, when the war was over. I was an only child, raised in a strict household. How I envied the neighbor children playing hopscotch on the sidewalk or swirling their bikes around the street corner. I was not allowed to play on the street and told to keep my distance from the children who attended the Dutch Chinese school rather than the all-Dutch school I went to. During my lonely childhood, books and blank pages of notebooks became my best friends. In their zeal to become westernized, my family encouraged the Dutch habit of reading for pleasure and boasted about my early accomplishments in penmanship, which came in the form of winning essay contests and having pieces published in the school paper and local newspaper. Books transported me to faraway foreign worlds, into settings entirely different from the one I lived in. Reading awoke a curiosity and longing to explore. However, rules of traditions and ways of the time kept me within the narrow boundaries of rigid family values. I escaped from these confinements when I fantasized about life in the worlds I read about while creating my own imaginary realms and adventures on notebook pages. These early reading and writing experiences kindled my love for language, which in turn sparked my desire to become a writer. I did not dare to share this dream with my family. I knew that in their linear thinking, there would be no room for a profession which did not guarantee a lucrative career from the onset. Realizing that it took more than talent to make a living as an author, I started to look for a profession which would allow me to write while holding a respectable job. Journalism, I thought, would fit the bill. The job could take me to places I so far had visited only in dreams and require that I write about the experience. However, before I could propose the idea to my family, the Indonesian Revolution determined the course of my life. The change in the political climate changed my family's focus from making sure that I became an independent professional woman to making sure that I remained safe and settled into an honorable marriage. With the thought of, later I'll come back to this, I married and placed a leather-bound edition of Pearl S. Buck's The Good Earth Trilogy, a parchment paper-jacketed Dutch translation of Marjorie Kinman Rawlings' The Yearling, and a coffee table edition of Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind on a bookshelf in my first home as a married woman. The books represented the first place winnings in writing contests. Later was in the early 90s, 4 decades later, living in a different country, speaking a different language, and discovering I'd lost the ability to write in Dutch. To make matters worse, when I tried writing in English, the page would not even qualify as a publishable journal entry. By now, I had lived a good 3 decades in the United States. While I spoke and read English fluently, my command of the language just proved to be insufficient to write for publication. Thus, I went back to school. I remember the morning I officially returned to writing vividly. Sitting at my desk with a brand new steno pad, a pencil holder filled with sharpened Ticonderoga No. 1 extra soft pencils, bottled up stories knocking at my chest wall, bursting in my head, I expected to pick up where I left long ago, writing stories in Dutch. I was taken by complete surprise when I could not find words to fill the empty light green pages. I resorted to alternating chewing on the end of my pencil and tapping my teeth with the eraser stub, while a feeling of being struck dumb took a hold of me. I had gone through major life adjustments to enable myself to follow a childhood dream and to make sure nothing would keep me from writing the stories I had carried buried in my gut for 4 decades. I left my desk and roamed the hills behind my house. Leaning into a hillside, I watched a flock of seagulls fly into a thermal. The wind swept across the dry wild oats and sighed through the lofty canopies of majestic oaks. But my mind's eye saw rice paddies and coconut trees. My inner ear heard Waar de Gouden Paddy Halmen, a Dutch school song hailing Indonesia's amber waves of grain. There was a story. I simply had to learn to tell it in the language I now used. As I eagerly absorbed English classes and writing courses, words began to form on the lines of my notepads. Sentences began to fill the blank pages, and then suddenly there were poems and stories. I could not write fast enough to record everything that was happening in my head or came bubbling to the surface from somewhere deep inside me. Some of those early uncensored ramblings later became the first drafts of a short story, a polished poem, a part of the novel. Those early years of going back to writing were extremely gratifying as well as liberating. While I was writing short stories and related to the book, the characters of Only a Girl one by one stepped forward. They took me back to Bandung, to the city as I knew it, to the time I listened to fairy tales read to me in Dutch while the fragrance of tuberoses came wafting through the screened window. With my characters, I once again sat down to leisure, scrumptious home-cooked meals, with heaping platters of Chinese, Indonesian, or Dutch food. Through scene, I peeled deep orange mangoes, juice dripping down my arm. I inhaled the heady scent of durian and listened to a gecko calling out the time of night as a pale moon climbed a magenta sky. From time to time, low-flying bombers, shouts of Bersiap and Merdeka and flying fires would interrupt these idyllic, peaceful moments. The frequency of my characters' appearances increased, and I started to write about their lives, first as separate stories, then weaving these together into a bigger work, a historical novel. Through the writing process, I lived with my characters as they encountered political and personal upheavals. Practicing a new learned writing skill, I recorded historical events without the bias derived from personal discomfort. Listening to my characters' voices, I noticed often their lives paralleled my own. However, simply recording their story without interjecting my own opinions provided me with a different lens from the one I used to view my own experiences. The writer's lens was much wider than the narrow, self-directed, focused one of the individual. Thus, writing Only a Girl became a cathartic experience on many levels. It took 7 years and 4 revisions before the characters matured, and I found the clarity needed to target an audience. Only a Girl was complete after I wrote my dedication to the sisterhood of women with whom I share the joys, loves, hopes, sacrifices, and pains that live in a woman's heart that molds a woman's life. Her predicament, an earlier version of the first chapter of Only a Girl, was included as a short story in Building Bridges from Writers to Readers, the 2006 San Francisco Writers Conference anthology. But then, life again interfered. Illness in the family prompted me to act as caregiver and halted all activities for 2 years. When I returned to the manuscript in the spring of 2008, I had a new acute sense of time. Following the sound and caring advice of a mentor who is a veteran in the publishing industry, I signed a contract to Publish America in March of 2009. The first copy of Only a Girl arrived in my mailbox in June of the same year. Only a Girl received a certificate of recognition from the California State Senator Lian Gouw and has ranked on Publish America's bestseller fiction list. In April of 2010, the Indonesian translation and publishing rights were bought by Gramedia, the largest Indonesian publisher. I look forward to attending the launch of the translation in Jakarta in October of 2010. Several libraries have purchased copies of Only a Girl. The book has also been enjoyed by many book clubs. It takes unfaltering diligence to successfully market writing not published by a known large publishing house. I am deeply grateful for the blessing of an enormous amount of support from friends and fellow writers. Without this, Only a Girl would not have been able to reach as many writers as it has. Please visit my website at www.liangouw.com. You may contact me at onlyagirl2009@gmail.com. I thank you in advance for your interest and support.